sport has the luxury of, preparation time. So you're playing your hockey match. So through the week, you're training and you're preparing and you're playing. A bit, sometimes not so much important for hockey, but kind of know the field you're on and some of the conditions. And so you prepare yourself and give yourself best chance to play well. Then you go and play the game. And in your case, you always won. But nonetheless, after the game, kind of review the game and work out some of the things that work really well for you, and then maybe a couple of things you'd like to tinker with. And then, of course, you've got a new opponent, so you restructure and re-prepare and replan and get ready. So sport has that luxury, which business doesn't, because business is in competition every day. So therefore, generally what business does, it just rolls from one day to the next.
How do you get 10,000 people to take a step to the left? What's behind the relentless mindset of a world champion? Why do teams of exceptional talent fail? How do you manage the pressure to perform? These are just some of the curious questions we will attempt to answer as we bring you world leaders, curious minds, exceptional talent, successful CEOs, and incredible human beings who know how to inspire great leaders and are inspiring great leaders themselves. I am Craig Johns, high performance leadership expert, international speaker, and CEO of Speakers Institute Corporate and World Sport Coach. This is the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong. Welcome to the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast. Buckle up for an episode like no other as we welcome a true luminary in the realm of Australian sports. With an illustrious career etched in cricketing history, our guest has donned the hat of a World Cup winning Australian cricket coach, leading the team to Ashes and World Cup glories. Boasting an impressive 79.83 winning percentage in cricket across Tests and One-Day Internationals, he stands shoulder to shoulder with legends like Vince Lombardi and Alex Ferguson. 2 Cricket World Cups, 3 Ashes series victories, and the historic win against India after 36 years, all orchestrated under his watchful eye. But there's more to him than meets the eye. A performance coach, a keynote speaker, and author, he's on a mission to impart the secrets of success. Armed with an honorary PhD, and a bachelor's in human movement studies, he is embodiment of academic rigor meets field expertise. Stay tuned as we unravel the layers of this multifaceted personality, exploring the intersection of sports, leadership, and the pursuit of excellence. John Buchanan. John, welcome to the show.
Yes, good day, Craig. Thanks very much for having me.
Now, you've had quite an exciting high-performance focus for many, many years, but I'm really curious, where did you grow up and what was the big dream when you were running around the playgrounds?
Look, I grew up on the Gold Coast back in the late 50s, early 60s, and it was really a country town in those days. It was still a long drive to Brisbane, a single-lane highway, and very little high-rise down the coast, and bit of a sleepy hollow. So I was fortunate enough. My parents sent me to the Southport School, which was a GPS school down there. Fortunately, we only lived across the road, so I didn't have to board. That was something that I needed, but at the time I enjoyed just being at home. But being at home meant that I used to play around in the backyard. We'd bring some friends out from school who were boarders on the weekend, and that's where all the test matches were played, in the backyard, in a net built by my father, and to protect gardens and windows and keep us a little bit contained. But that's where the dreams were. The dreams were playing for Australia. Cricket was my preferred sport, so it was down in the baggy green, but equally, I played a lot of rugby league and rugby union test matches back there, played Davis Cup, anything really in the backyard, and the dream was to play for Australia.
Yeah, brilliant. It's I think you've got to be able to visualize things first before you can achieve things. How far did you go from a cricketer's point of view as a young up-and-coming cricket player? What sort of level did you get to? And was there a time where you just realized, you know what, I may not make this, but I'm a really good coach?
Yes, look, I really think, certainly when I was growing up, I mean, the world's changed and doesn't mean one's better than the other, but certainly when I was growing up, there was a bit of black and white TV and radio. So that's how I was transported onto the cricket fields, whether it be in England or in Australia. Occasionally I was fortunate enough to go to the Gabba and watch some games, but in the main, the visualization came through your imagination, so we would, as I said, play these test matches, and we'd have the old ABC cricket books and all the names, draw the names out of hats, and you sort of donned the guise of the individual player as you sort of imagined them to be.
Yeah.
So they were I think the important parts of pursuing this cricket dream of wearing the baggy green. So I pursued that. I did well at school, went on to university, played for University Cricket Club for a long period of time, managed to get into the Queensland Sheffield Shield team in the late 70s, went to England, played professional cricket in England for Oldham in the Central Lancs League, and Cambridgeshire and minor counties. So I was sort of heading all in the right direction, and then a bit of injury, but at that time also came the end of the Packer era. So Packer had taken a lot of players out of Sheffield Shield cricket, obviously, and out of the Australian cricket team, and they'd gone and formed World Series cricket. And when that came to a conclusion, when the ACB, as it was termed then, and Channel 9 through Packer came to an agreement about how they could all work together, then all the players returned to their various states. And at that stage, that's where ambition and ability sort of parted company. And I realised then that maybe I was a bit too harsh on myself, but overall, I think I made a reasonable assessment to say, yeah, this is about as far as this dream's going to go. So it was time to chase another dream. So at that stage, I had a degree, and I was about to be married. So I went off and became a recreation officer in the Townsville City Council, and began my sort of professional working career at that point in time, which was in the early 80s.
No. So obviously playing in the backyard, was there a specific player that you maybe idolized the most and really and tried to emulate?
Well, obviously everybody wanted to be Bradman. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I think everybody still does want to be Bradman because he was just the icon, if you like, of that sport. And indeed, there's been lots of research around in modern times where they try to compare using algorithms and so on, athletes across all ranges of sport. And I think Bradman still finished on the top of those. So, look, it was Bradman. We had our local heroes coming from Queensland. There were the Peter Burgess and the Tom Beavers and the Ken Mackays, Wally Grouts and so on, who were all playing for Australia. So in a sense, you always wanted to have one of those in your side in the backyard. So, and then, of course, the legendary Australian players at that time from the Lindwells and Bennos and Harveys and O'Neills and so on. So this is going way back, of course. There was always great, but we didn't just confine ourselves to Australian players. We looked all around the world, all the South Africans and the New Zealanders, albeit there weren't too many New Zealanders because, as I understand, you're from New Zealand. And it's probably important to let you know right at that period of time, there wasn't too many New Zealanders in our list. But a lot of English, a few Indians and so on. So it was just a magic time to create, all those wonderful memories, I suppose, but all the engrossing test matches we had in that backyard.
Yeah, brilliant. Obviously, you become a really strong leader as a coach, and then continued on to do that as kind of consultant in the future. Was there someone or maybe a couple of people that really stood out as having a massive impact on the way you've approached both coaching and leadership over the years?
No, I don't believe any one person in particular. I guess I've been reasonably eclectic in terms of how I finally worked out how I coach. So, I mentioned I went and started working as a recreational officer at Townsville City Council. That was followed then by a whole series of jobs, Commonwealth Games, National Director for Australian Volleyball, went into teaching in TAFE. Then we went overseas. I got a master's at the University of Alberta, came back and lectured at University of Canberra, and then back to the Department of Tourism, Sport and Racing, and managed a program of Quality Sports, which sort of, and then in between that, or along the way, there was 5 children as well. So come about mid-94, that's when really I became serious about this thing called coaching. We'd come back to Brisbane in the early 90s, and I'd gone back to my cricket club, obviously coached a lot of my young children in their various clubs and so on in junior sport. But I decided that having studied at University of Alberta and some coaching, some philosophy, some psychology, some organisational theory, that could I actually coach adults? So I went back to my old club and started coaching there for 2 years and was reasonably successful there doing that. And the Queensland job came up in 94. Jeff Thompson was coaching at the time, and Mark Buchanan beat his offsider, and they'd been coaching for 4 years or so. And they got okay, but Queensland still had never won this thing called the Sheffield Shield, which became obviously the Holy Grail. And so I put my hand up to have a go at it, and was given the opportunity to do so. And to do that, though, it really meant going back to your original question. How do I coach? What do I believe in? What are my values? What are my principles? What are my cornerstones? So it took me all the way back to that backyard at Mum and Dad's place, and the values and principles that my parents instilled in me, and then taking that forward to the school and the various teachers and coaches that I had that were also doing similar sorts of things, the players I played with when I came to the University Cricket Club. My first game, I walked into the dressing room and there were basically all my idols when I'd been at school. I follow grade cricket, and here they were, and I was actually with them. And there was a couple of test players. I mentioned one before, Tom Beavers, and our opposition was filled also with Sheffield Shield players. So there was a lot of learnings that went on in that time from those players, and then my experiences for the season I had for Queensland, plus my overseas experiences and the people you run into. So, and then through all my work experiences as kind of a leader of small teams, but also answering to other bosses. So from all that, I worked out in the end what I like, what I don't like, what I want to do, what I don't want to do, and then how do I actually deliver all that. So that sort of formed my philosophy and approach to coaching, which I then took to that interview for Queensland and was successful in getting the job. And in that first season, we won the Sheffield Shield, which was a pretty amazing event to be part of. It wasn't necessarily part of the plan that we were going to win it first year. My pitch to them was that we would dominate domestic cricket for the next 10 years, and then somewhere in there, because we would be changing a lot of system and process, that we would win a Sheffield Shield. That not only would we win one, but we would be in a better position to win more because we understood what we were doing.
Yeah, I love that. Sort of going back to the basics and really thinking about the strategy on how we can build the foundations up, and obviously achieve really, quite high success in that first year. We've got a few, when I look at kind of some leadership roles that have come up in both corporate and sport, this year, for instance, you look at Vanessa Hudson going into the Qantas CEO role, who's probably coming into a very challenging space where everyone's eyes are on her for possibly all the wrong reasons. From a business perspective. Then you have someone like Scott Robertson in New Zealand, who is taking over the All Blacks, which has a very esteemed history of, a very high winning percentage. Just got second at the World Cup. And has come from a dominant winning background. Those pressures, when you take over a team or take over a company that's one either going really successful or is struggling and the eyes are on you, can be quite can challenge people in different ways. For you stepping into the Australian role, as you're comparing the Australian role where you're kind of stepping into a place where they had been performing really, really well, have a great history, versus, say, the Queensland team where they hadn't won yet. What was it like for you going into both of those roles from a mindset perspective? Were you feeling a bit of imposter syndrome? Were you feeling the pressure of, for the Australian team that you've got to live up to everyone's expectations versus, say, you've got a massive opportunity at Queensland?
Yeah, look, all good questions. And then sort of throw into the mix, I also went and coached Middlesex for a season where they had been a very successful team but it slipped down the pecking order for a while. I had a new captain come in, so I was sort of brought over there to change things around. And then when the IPL, the Indian Premier League, started, I was one of the first coaches in there with one of the first friends. So it was a startup, really. But I suppose, yes, there are no doubt always pressures. So when I took on the Queensland job, I never felt imposter syndrome, but I knew I didn't have any of the experience of first-class coaching. I, in my own mind, I knew, as I said before, I knew my philosophy principles, what I was going to do and how I was going to go about it. But at the same stage, I knew I couldn't do that without the support of the players. And so, I really actively sought their help. Not necessarily in the big decisions, because I don't know that, well, I didn't believe that was necessarily their role, but that was my role. But it was more the things that were affecting them directly. So it was a little bit around, dress codes, what they like, what they would be comfortable in doing, because again, I was pretty keen for us to look and be different and act different. And so I wanted to take them away from a casual sort of Queensland look to a more, business look, I suppose, when you travelled, and then look a little bit better when you sort of move on to the training paddock. So I wanted to bring that sense to them. I wanted to understand, how they best travelled and hotel and accommodation, all those sort of things. And some of the things that they liked in and around training that would help them in their training, albeit I was going to change the way training looked anyway. So that was always, the approach. And then in that first year, we introduced computer technology, which hadn't been done in sport before. Or sorry, I shouldn't say it hadn't been done. It was right at the very beginnings of it. A couple of other sports, and Bob, I think in South Africa at the time, was beginning to fiddle around with it in cricket. But certainly we were the first state, and probably sport, to really delve into it seriously. So, that was a lot of experimentation, because I just, I was not a computer person, but I knew what I wanted at the other end of it. And so, we set about doing that. And obviously there is resistance, because players just want to go and play, which is fair enough. And then, what's a bit of data going to help? What's a bit of computer technology? How's that going to help me bowl a cricket ball? How's that going to help me hit a cricket ball? So there was a lot of those things that we needed to walk through. But gradually, we got most people on side. And then, of course, winning that Shield the first time round, that helps anything you're doing, whether, you're a long-term coach or, in this case, first-term coach. If you can get some success at something you're doing, then it almost automatically says, oh, well, all the things that you're doing must be working, and so we'll continue on. So potentially you finish up with less resistance there. But going to the Australian job, at least I had a coaching pedigree by that stage. I'd been coaching 5 years and got some good results. But nonetheless, it was still very much a case of trying to bring the players with me, because for them, they were a good team, but from players that were in the Australian team who'd come back into the Queensland team, when they weren't playing for Australia, I always got a sense there was a heck of a lot of stuff that could be improved in that Australian team. And certainly their results would show that as well, even though they got some good results. They just won the 99 World Cup, and Stephen Ward just take over as captain. So There was things heading in the right direction, but I just believe they were scratching at the surface. So that was really my approach to them when I first met them, and that was the notion of going on a journey to Everest together. So there are a lot of, I guess, expectations and pressures, but for me, I suppose it was always a case of I need to stick to me. I can only deliver me. I can only do what I can do. And if that's not good enough, or we don't get the results, or somebody else has a different opinion, then okay, that's the way it rolls, because that's what happened in one of my experiences in Middlesex. It didn't work out. It didn't work out because I didn't strike up a good relationship with the captain, and I was really trying to push change way too quickly, albeit that's what the board was asking for. But I could have chosen the easy route, same in the Indian Premier League with Sourav Ganguly. For me, an icon player in India and just an incredible leader for them in terms of changing the mindset of Indian players, sort of building on what had gone before him. But I believe this new format, the T20 game, had passed him by, and that was my conversation with him all the time. I don't think you're the right captain for the side. I don't think you think quick enough. You're physically not in shape for what the game demands. Have another role, but not that role. So again, I could have chosen not to do that. I could have chosen not to approach it that way and just sort of roll along and gradually made some small change. But that doesn't sit inside my philosophy and principles and vision and really never being satisfied with where you're at. So in both cases, I could have protected those jobs by compromising my principles, but I wasn't prepared to. So I was sacked in Middlesex, and I eventually was sacked in the IPL. Whereas, I guess, fortunately, Queensland job worked out well, and then I was involved with the Australian team and had 8 years there where we had incredible success. And nonetheless, I was still me all the way through that. And therefore, I think that insulated me a little bit from expectations. Certainly winning helps. If you're losing, it's a different story, and you're continually under the guise of the media and then other stakeholders and other critics. And then, of course, we lost the Ashes in 2005 in England, and so I felt the brunt of that at that point in time. But again, all that did was force me to go back, and it made me ask 3 important questions, I think, which are important to leaders. I'm sure Vanessa Hudson and Scott and a range of people will have already done so, maybe pre this or given their new role. But the first one was, could I make a difference? So with that Australian team, after we lost, I'd been there 6 years. We'd won a heck of a lot of things. We hadn't lost too much. But, my head was on the chopping block. So I had to go to the board and say why I should be retained. But I had to first convince myself or ask myself whether I should be retained before I go to them. So the first question was, could I still make a difference? And that is still around Everest. What are the dreams and aspirations that we can chase still? So that was one. Second was, did I still have the energy to do it? And so while I could possibly say, yes, look, this is inevitably what we could chase, but, an Australian player, but an Australian coach, you're virtually 365 days a year, because you're 250 nights a year away from home, whether you're playing in your home country or not, you're still away from home. And then for a coach, those down periods is when you're actually thinking about the next 250 nights. Yeah. So did I really still have that passion, desire, fire, energy to chase the dreams? And then the third one was, if the first two was yes, which they were, I needed to go to the senior players, who was at that stage Ricky Ponting, Adam Gilchrist, the leadership group, and just say, listen, do you guys still want me around? Because, of course, if they didn't, then it didn't really matter what I said in the first two. If they weren't going to support me, there would be no reason for me then to reapply for the job. Anyway, they said yes, and so I was able to go to the board and then paint a picture about what it was going to be like for the next 20 months, at which time I said, oh, I'll be finishing with you getting that length of time.
It's a true test of your character that you have the ability to kind of step back and you ask the players and ask those questions. I'm not sure everyone does sometimes. They kind of, the ego kicks in a way. And I'm sure you face this many times when you achieve great success or you achieve poor performance. And generally in those times is when people's true character comes out. And so how, like for you, dealing with a lot of personalities, a lot of high ego, characters inside the team, in those situations, how much of a role did you play in just ensuring that people keep their feet on the ground?
Well, I think it's a 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week role. So for me, again, which is part of, I guess, my principles, but it was I needed to live them. I needed everybody to see every day that irrespective of whether we're winning or we're losing, irrespective of what the media or whatever else is going on, either off field or on field, that I was just pretty calm, and pretty stable, and pretty measured about those sorts of potential impacts. And so by doing that, in my mind, I was at least modelling the type of behaviours that I thought were really important to the group. Then, of course, there are plenty of one-on-one meetings, there are plenty of team meetings, there are bringing people into the mix that are aligned in philosophy but will help that whole process, because again, sometimes leaders, and I was certainly one of those, that need to recognise that you're not the right person to talk to some people at some times, or you may not be the right person to talk to a person most of the time, but there are others in your midst that can do that on your behalf. And so, it's a constant job of both modelling and structuring and subtly influencing all the sorts of things that you want, so that in terms of a culture and then in terms of performance or preparing to perform and then performing, in essence, the players are very much feeling that they're in control of all that. It's really coming from them, and so that's part of the approach. It's about the coach really being redundant. If you're actually doing your job, whether you're a psychologist, a teacher, a coach, whatever it might be, if you do your job well, then people shouldn't need you. But of course, as we know, people change every day, and the dynamics in a team environment change every day. And so that's why I said your job is 24/7, because in a sense, you're monitoring all that and trying to insert yourself when and where it's appropriate and with whom it's appropriate, or conversely, making sure it's not you and other things are happening, but are going to actually help you achieve the sort of outcome that you're trying to change.
We have a fascinating, I suppose, dynamic happening in regards to culture. And we see some leaders who think they need to protect culture and it's kind of like a stable thing, whereas we know, as you're talking about there, the cultures are constantly evolving. People are changing, the dynamics are changing. What is absolutely crucial to hold on to as a leader? What things can you put in place to ensure that overall the culture remains somewhat steady, but allows that evolution to occur, that avoids, sort of veering too far to the right or to the left, in either a corporate or a coaching or in a team situation?
Leadership is certainly one of the key elements. So in the cricket team, the captain, the vice captain, and senior players are really important in terms of at least understanding maybe the culture that you want and where you want to go, and them then either delivering on that, or at the very least not resisting, not putting up a barrier to it. So one of the corporates I'm working with at the moment, where I'm the coach in residence. So basically, I work with the CEO and his senior leadership team, and he is a very, very good example of the right sort of leader in terms of culture for that organisation. Just the way that he talks, the way that he's available, the way that he works, that he actively, delivers on what he's asking for of his troops. He's delivering on that himself, and so that's one thing. I think then where you've got the opportunity, it's about the recruitment and the selection process. So obviously the leadership group are generally going to be there, which is a good thing. But beyond that, where you can influence some key recruitments, then that becomes an important part of the puzzle as well. So, for instance, in the cricket team, it would be around my assistant coach, or it would be around my strength and conditioning coach, or it would be around my physio, or it might be around the masseur, because those people are friends to the players always, because they're no threat in terms of selections and other things that might impact on what they want to do on the cricket field. Yeah. Where they do impact is helping them be better on the cricket field. So it's either skill-based or it's physically based. Sometimes a performance psychologist, so it could be mentally-based. So therefore they have lots of conversations, generally one-on-one conversations with individual players. And so I needed to know that those people would be influencing and talking with the players in the way that I thought would be important. I didn't need them to be, divergently opposed to the sort of things that I was doing. So I think that's another really important part, so long as you actually understand where you're going. And I think that's another really, really important part of the puzzle is, as I said, we created Everest, and then, well, what does Everest mean? So, it would be recreated every tournament maybe, or sometimes down to a game, or over a period of time. So it was always, in a sense, that's what we're aspiring to be. So we always knew that, and I think that's a really important part. That's what I see in this corporate at the moment, that they just don't have a real clear shared picture about what they could be. And I think if we can get that, then the leadership helps drive that. And then sitting underneath that are those key influencing people that then really impact on the troops, So those things are important. And then it sits around accountability. But accountability means that, firstly, every person needs to be accountable for their own actions, so on field and off field, and then responsible for the team or the team culture, because, in other words, they can't be accountable for somebody else, but they can be responsible insofar as this is that notion, the standards you walk past, the standards you accept. So if somebody or some things are not really quite right, it is their responsibility to at least alert of that person or somebody else that these things need fixing. So they become really, really important, that in a mature team, everybody becomes a coach, like everybody, either a training or off field or wherever. Everybody becomes a really important decision maker in how things are going to unfold.
Along the way, both in your experience working with the corporates, but also when you're working with your teams, have you spent the time to allow them to decide what behaviors are appropriate, or versus you coming in as the leader and going, here, this is how things are going to work? Which approach have you taken, or do you kind of do a bit of a mixture?
Yeah, look, I prefer to see myself as a puppeteer. Insofar as, would always want input from everybody as much as possible. so the notion of empowering everybody to make the decisions. However, there's always a caveat on that, and that is, again, as I said before, I don't really want people veering off in directions that are absolutely going to be too disruptive for the group, or at least take us in directions that we don't need to go. So when that occurs, then I've got to find ways and means of actually steering either that individual or that idea or that action or behaviour or decision back on track somehow. Now, hopefully I can steer that back on track by conversation and getting people to understand. However, if I can't, then there will be the need to actually step in and basically say, no, we can't do that at this stage for this reason. But overall, again, going back to what I said when I started with the Queensland team, very much trying to get the players involved in the decisions that I think were going to impact on them directly. The bigger decisions I thought were really still my role, but having said that, even if I did make them, there was a great need to actually bring people along with you. Otherwise, e.g. the computer technology, why would we spend money on technology? Well, a lot of resistance, but gradually we got people to understand the benefits of it for them individually and for us collectively.
Yeah, I've kind of found working with people that when the leader or the leadership team have developed their absolute clarity on what their vision's going to be and can articulate that, then I find really asking the employees or the team members two really important questions. One is, what does a world-class version of this look like? Of this team look like? And then the second one is, what is going to stop us from doing that? And from there, then you can actually pull out the key themes. And I find in that way, then the players or the employees hold each other accountable because they have complete buy-in into what it is that it's going to take to achieve that vision together. Because I think it's difficult to try and get everyone involved in creating the vision sometimes. That can be a really difficult part, but the behaviors is something that everyone can be a part of. And even if some of the things they suggested didn't come through, at least they've had an opportunity to be part of it. So I always find that really useful.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, with this organisation I'm working with at the moment, so they've got a head office in Brisbane, and then they've got their regional offices. So, that adds a degree of complexity to everything you just said. With the Australian cricket team, we were sort of central office, meaning that we'd come together in competition. That was the only time we came together. Yeah. But otherwise, they would be out in the regions or in their states. So I had to try to make sure that, all the state coaches, certainly the state coaches, but if there are assistant coaches, kind of understood what I was trying to do. And that they, I wasn't going to tell them exactly how they should run the show, but so long as they understood where we were going, and also understood, where we saw different players, either what they're doing well or some of the training needs or some of the, skills that maybe that we thought were important for them, that we kind of had that communication going as much as we possibly could. So yeah, to your point, certainly, the more, and I think it's an interesting thing these days, as I'm seeing now, it's remote working. So you don't have to just be in a regional office. You're now in an office and everybody's at home. So in a sense, we're kind of this nation of all coming together as a unit, and just being in the one room at the one time and thrashing things out. That's changed a little bit, but nonetheless, the principle sits in behind that.
You've got your book, and obviously it's on the screen that I'm looking at right now, If Better Is Possible. I find it's really fascinating to kind of think of how difficult it is to continue, if we look at a sporting sense, and then I'm going to tie this into corporate later on. But from a sporting sense, to continue winning and being unbeaten for a long period of time. We talk about some of the best teams in the world, most successful teams of all time. You look at the All Blacks, the Australian cricket team. You look at, we talked about Vince Lombardi and Sir Alex Ferguson. Realistically, the longest winning streaks are only around 20 games. I think with Tests it was 16, is that right? And 23 with one days. I think the All Blacks are around the same. it's extremely hard to continue winning. I was very fortunate to be part of a team that holds a New Zealand record for most unbeaten games in a row, and it potentially is a world record. We haven't found anyone else out yet, and it was in field hockey of 272 games unbeaten.
Oh, good.
So 16 years. They lost the final the year before I started, so I was 13 years old playing in the Premier Men's team. They lost the game the year before in the final, and they'd won the previous 5 years. So they lost one game in 21 years. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
But why is it so tough? Why is it so difficult to get a team that has got, amazing players that can gel together, 80% of the time they can get it right? Why is it so difficult to keep winning all the time?
Yeah, look, a few things I think. Internally there's a mindset battle that you need to conquer, because, there are old myths floating around, which we addressed a few times, is that, every win you have means you're closer to your next loss. And the question is, well, why? Why does that have to be right? Why aren't you closer to your next win? So often, I think the little bit of that resides in the back room or in the dressing room. Whenever we win, and this is more anecdotal than anything else, but if I look through the 11 players, there might be 4 of those players on field that you'd say were 90% and above in terms of what you'd expect them to do on the field, given who they were. You might say there is another 3 or so that sit in the maybe 60 to 90%. And then there's another 3 or 4 that are well below that, So when you're winning, even though it's a great feeling, not everybody's lived up to their reputations and delivered. But the essential feature of teams that you're associated with, and when other teams do win over an extended period of time, it's not the same people that occupy those positions, So the next game, the top 3 or 4 might in fact be the people who are at the bottom 3 or 4 in the previous game. So one of the critical parts of teams sustaining success over a period of time is that it isn't just relying on 1 or 2 people. It becomes a real team on-field effort. And then that extends to off-field, because we were just talking about culture. So what we need in the people who surround the team are, again, people who believe in the players, who believe in winning, who believe in, who have the same sort of mindset. And so these days, when you look at, the recent World Cup and those squads, you look at an Australian cricket team and those squads, and I think of this corporate that I'm working with, there are a heck of a lot of people in there. There are a heck of a lot of people. And so inside that, there will be now a lot more doubters and possibly more than doubt, quite cynical sometimes about, how things are going. And so their effect can erode some of the real mentality and positive performance stuff that, that the rest of the group might maintain. So therefore, I think it becomes increasingly difficult to manage a group of people, and certainly manage an organisation, to say, right, we're going to win every project, and we're going to win every day, because there are so many people in there who doubt themselves and doubt the organisation. So I imagine in your 272 wins or whatever it was over 5 years, there would have been a really, really strong nucleus of players that were in that group. You might have had a few come and go, but, over a period of time, the turnover would have been relatively small, and the influences on that group would have been relatively small. And the key influence, obviously, family and friends, it would have been, because the playing group was consistent, then the friends and family were consistent as well. So, and then, when I look at cricket these days, there's home and away games, obviously, which has always been the case. But in previous times when we toured, we'd have pre-game matches, before going into a test match or into a one-day series. And then through the tournament, through the series, we'd be playing some intervening games as well prior to going into the next test match, which allowed those players who were your first up selections to have a bit of a break, freshen up, get ready. But it also gave those who weren't in the team, who were on the edges and wanted to be in the team, it gave them an opportunity to try to press for selection. These days, you virtually arrive into another country, maybe 10 days or maybe 5 days before you begin a tournament. And then there is no intervening games. And so players get injured, they're not performing, and then you pick from players who are actually not playing to bring them into the starting lineup.
No.
So I think that makes it really, really difficult these days for teams, certainly away from home, but even at home, it's getting a bit hard to perform consistently and therefore win consistently.
Yeah, it certainly is. I'm in the process of interviewing everyone in that team over the 16 years and looking at kind of what allowed that to happen. And there's some unique things that stand out that kind of resonate with some other research that's done. I just find it fascinating for me. I listen to, I see lots of stuff go out there around what is high performance. And I go, look, it's nice, it helps, but really all you're doing is providing skill sets that will allow a team to perform. But it's very different to high performing. So yeah, I'm always a little bit, it's interesting. I think high performance in a way in the corporate world has kind of been watered down a little bit just by a lot of people saying they're high performance, talking about what high performance is without really realizing there's a difference between performing well and being high performance in a situation. But what have you noticed in the corporate space where there are no defined rules, there is no there is no oval, there is no boundary rope, etc. to I suppose somewhat the game they are playing? And I know Simon Sinek talks about the finite game and the infinite game and the differences between kind of sport setting where it's very finite versus infinite where you are in the corporate world. How do you know if you're actually winning in a corporate setting?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I think most organisations struggle with that. I mean, there are certain areas in business that don't, and I think of sales as one, and probably, if you're on the stock exchange floor, that's probably another, because what's happening there is you're actually dealing in data, minute by minute almost, but also you've got a scoreboard, so I think what sport or where some of those sort of things can help the corporate world is, firstly, I reckon scoreboards become really, really important to help business corporates reduce their infinite game to a finite game.
Yeah.
And to do that and to help that is that, sport has the luxury of, preparation time. So you're playing your hockey match, so through the week you're training and you're preparing and you're playing. Sometimes not so much important for hockey, but kind of know the field you're on and some of the conditions. And so you prepare yourself and give yourself best chance to play well. Then you go and play the game, and in your case, you always won. But nonetheless, after the game, kind of review the game and work out some of the things that work really well for you, and then maybe a couple of things you'd like to tinker with. And then, of course, you've got a new opponent, so you restructure and prepare and replan and get ready. So sport has that luxury, which business doesn't, because business is in competition every day. So therefore, generally what business does, it just rolls from one day to the next.
Yeah.
And in the main, generalisation, it doesn't take time to reflect on or set up for success. So, probably increasingly a number of businesses, or at least a number of sections in business, will maybe have a team huddle of a morning, 10 minutes. This is, shift work is a really good example of that, in various sectors. But I work in mining a bit. So, when the new shift comes on, the supervisor or shift manager writes, says, well, this is the day, this is blah, 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 and spends 10 to 15 minutes, a bit of a toolbox talk, and then off they go, Now, in the corporate world, or very rarely is that occurring. The leader of any small team is right. This is what the day looks like. This is what we're trying to achieve today, and off you go. And then, even if they did that, well, do they actually then spend the time the next morning, in a sense, very quickly saying, well, what happened yesterday?
Yeah.
How do we go? What do we need to fix? And this is the day coming. So leaders don't do that. Their teams don't do that. And therefore, corporates don't do that. And therefore, that's why the game becomes infinite. Whereas I believe it can become finite, because one, leaders and teams should be better at doing that. And secondly, if they then instituted some form of scoreboard to measure that, and would set up, 1 week, 2 week milestone targets, then there will be an ongoing assessment, just as you said, like a sporting team. You put a boundary around it, and you play, and then you actually can make some assessment, and then you can do something with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really important component, I think, having that scoreboard or dashboard in a way that you can constantly review, you can debrief, and, you can plan, deliver, debrief, and continue moving forward, and seeing how you can, obviously improve the scoreboard as you each day is so important. That tight feedback loop, which we generally don't see so often in corporate world. We do it all the time when we're coaching. If you're a good coach, you're always giving tight feedback loops, but it doesn't happen so much in corporate. And it's trying to figure out how we can do that more often.
No, and then
effectively
down to that individual level, as you're just saying with coaching and feedback, is that's when feedback's most important, most impactful. Is that if you can give that feedback that it's accurate, firstly, but it's as immediate as you can make it, then that's impactful. But of course, the old performance reviews, which still exist, 6 months or 12 months, and we can hardly remember what happened in a day, let alone 6 months' time or 12 months' time. And then the timing's gone. I mean, it becomes irrelevant. So that's why, as I was just saying before, I think, as you say, national dashboard scoreboards, and then that reflection process, both for the team and individuals, will lead to really opportunities for that continual improvement.
Spending a bit of time in corporate now, and obviously I'm going to get you to put on your kind of futuristic hat in a way. What are the big things that leaders are going to, and even coaches in a way, coaches of sporting teams, what are some of the key things that you feel are going to be integral in being able to navigate, the next 5-10 years in the way that we lead, knowing that, we've had quite a fundamental shift in the way that we kind of live and work, and even the behaviors that we accept or don't accept anymore, and the things that we're more open to. What are the big shifts that you're going to see that leaders are really going to need to focus on, and coaches are going to focus on in the next 5-10 years?
Probably just the fundamentals, the basics. So, for example, I was talking to a chap here in Brisbane the other day who heads up a big mining operation, and I said to him, what are the things that you're really facing that you think need addressing, in the next period of time? And he said, well, firstly, technology, because technology is changing all the time. And so it's how to embrace technology so that it becomes a useful tool rather than it becoming a dictator of what you do. So whether that's hardware or whether it's something like, AI or ChatGPT, it's actually trying to embrace it so that it becomes a real tool of use for you as a leader and for the business. So how to do that, and therefore how to find people who are across all that. And then tied into that is the data. There is absolutely so much information these days, whether it be sport for business. It's just overwhelming. So what I think becomes really important to help leaders make decisions is going to be these data analysts and data scientists who can, sift through, again, understanding where the business wants to be and how it's trying to get there. So what now is really the important information that you need as a leader to help you make good decisions now that will impact on the future. So that's, to me, really important. And one of the other things that he said was, he said, we were having trouble with this hydraulic pump at one of their mine sites. And he said we had, 6 or 7 engineers on it, try to fix it. No luck. And he said, I talked to a consultant down here. He said, I've got a bloke who's 70 plus and worked in hydraulics all his life. I think he'll be able to help him. So sends him up to the mine site, and he said in 10 minutes and found the problem and fixed it. And so his point was, and I see it in this corporate organisation I'm working with, that because life seems to be going so fast, leaders say they haven't got any time anymore to kind of manage and lead properly because they're just so busy. That we have potentially this exodus of knowledge, experience, and wisdom outdoor without it actually being shared, recorded, as part and made part of not only culture, but technical systems and so on. So in other words, we're tending to see that everything bright and shiny and new is better than what was beforehand. But in fact, a lot of stuff that was beforehand was pretty basic, fundamental, but it works, and new people coming in, whether it's a sporting team or a corporate team, are jumping rungs on the ladder to keep getting further up the ladder. And then what becomes more important is that you actually need to go through those rungs. Well, firstly, you need to have those rungs in place and then be able to transition people through that. So I think the ability to store that knowledge and experience, whether that's stored by way of e-technology or whether it's stored by way of holding, people not necessarily in the job, but having access to them so that they want to come back and contribute and mentor and coach and really be a resource to the organisation. I think that really is something that a lot of places need to take very, very seriously.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's important. You're someone who loves, supporting young up and coming people and things like that. If someone is inside an organization, or even they are maybe a player in sport, but they are getting close to that point of transitioning into being a people manager, whether it be a coach or whether it be leading teams inside organizations, what would be some guidance that you would share with them in how to approach that transition from being a great individual contributor to now being a leader of people?
Yes. Well, not everybody can do it. So just because you're good technically, we often see that then the good technicians get promoted into more administrative roles or where they have to manage people without necessarily the training or without necessarily finding out whether or not they're good at doing it, So the first thing, I'll go back to what I said when I took on the president coaching role, I think the first thing is you just got to be really understanding of how you operate as a person. You just got to know that inside out. And everybody has a philosophy and a whole set of principles, but again, they very rarely reflect on what they are. And so when you lead people or when you coach people or you're in a position of authority, what those people underneath you want is you to be consistent. So it may mean that they don't necessarily agree with you or they don't like you all the time, but they actually very clearly understand you and what you stand for. And so therefore the young leader who has now been taken out of the workforce, if you like, the people that they're about to now lead, that's a big step. And I saw that in the mining industry. Supervisors that set up shifts were taken up from the shift and placed into that supervisory role without a heck of a lot of training. And so in that shift force, then you've got people who are good friends with them, people who didn't like them, and old hands who don't agree with them. And yet they weren't given any skills to actually manage that sort of environment. So, but the first step is, one, you got to certainly understand how you operate yourself, because you have to deliver that every day, so people know what you stand for. And then it's really, in a sense, a bit of an organisation's responsibility to do some really good assessments, I think, in terms of what the role is, and therefore what is the type of person they're looking for that role. And just because they're good at what they do currently does not necessarily guarantee that that's going to flow on into a people management sense. So, I think it's a bit of both. The individual has to be very clear on themselves, and the organisation has to be very clear on the role and what they're looking for.
Beautiful. I've just come off delivering an emerging leaders program in Canberra for a peak body association, and just love. I think the people that have been selected for the right reasons, in that they can see that they not only good at what they did, but they have those talents to lead people. And I think it was fun being in that situation where it wasn't just a group of people because they were great technicians. They were actually there because they could see the potential in them and leading people, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
We all know smart people have great answers, but the most successful people ask great questions. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
Yes. Well, it's probably not. The answer is probably not necessarily for the first time, but again, it's a principle that I'm coaching a first 11 cricket team at the moment in local GPS competition in Brisbane, and so I guess while it's not the first time, but I try to treat every session as its first time, so that I don't want to necessarily repeat what's just been done. I want to make the session different. I want to make it as enjoyable and as challenging as possible. So, and that's probably what I try to do most times, is not to just rinse and repeat, although that does occur. I'm not saying I don't, but wherever I can, I try to make something as new as possible, because that's exciting for me and challenging for me. And if it is for me, then it should be for those who I'm either teaching or coaching or speaking with.
Yeah, brilliant. What is the one question that you would love to solve?
Yeah, that'd be scratching my head. I'll tell you one story that sticks in my mind. When I went to university and first year engineering I was doing, and we had a physics lecturer, and his question was, you're driving along the road and you see a big sort of dark spot on the road in front of you. He said, why is that? Geez, what is going on? Like, it had everybody scratching their head. But it was all about, as you're driving along, what happens is the car actually goes into a dip just before the black spot on the road. And because the car goes into a dip, then all the oil and muck under the car is then shaken loose, or some of it is. And so it's the principles of momentum and inertia, which then the spot is beyond the dip because of momentum and so on. So that always reminds me of that. But I suppose a couple of things that I thought of was, it came from a book, what's the meaning of life? What is the actual meaning of life? And that was Viktor Frankl, I suppose. And because when you look around life and you see some people that really seem to be doing it tough, or really seem to be getting the rubber, the green, the wrong way all the time, and you just wonder why should that be happening to them? Why? If we've got to have bad things happen to society, then why can't we share it, in a sense? But why does it happen to some people? So anyway, part of the meaning of life, why?
Good question. I love it. For you, what is an inspiring great leader? And who's a great example of this for you?
All right, again, I'm not going to give you a simple answer, unfortunately. So I think a great leader, there's written a couple of things down, mate. Takes a complex and makes it simple for the audience. They're a person of what you see them as high integrity. So meaning that whatever they say they're going to do, they do. And so it builds trust, and you see them as a very honest person. I think they're a person of great wisdom. They have compassion, and they certainly will always demonstrate an interest in you. You seem to be the most important person to them. So who is that? Well, there's no one in particular for me, but I've seen it in bosses, some colleagues, captains that I've coached with or coached against, and then obviously some family and friends. They all at different times are inspiring because they bring those sort of values and principles and actions into life.
Love it. John, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure people would like to learn more about what you do and your thoughts on life and what the meaning of life is, and also leadership. How can people learn more about what you do, and what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, well, thanks, Craig. Look, the easiest way will be the website, I think, buchanancoaching.com. That's the best place to find me, or I'm on LinkedIn, which is another easy place to find me, John Buchanan, or Buchanan Success Coaching, either way. So that's the easiest way, and then people can, book a chat or just follow other details on the website.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, John. I love your approach to life, the mindset, that being really grateful, and the humility you show along the way, and just that staying really grounded when opportunities have presented them, or you have created opportunities, and to really think around what are those foundations of what's required to be able to deliver the best possible environment you can in those situations, whether it be the first 11 cricket team you're working with, whether it's the Australian cricket team, or it's even some of the corporates you're working with. The way your mind works is sensible, but it's also looking towards the future and around how can we continue to evolve and do things differently. I thank you for your time. It's been wonderful, and I look forward to continuing the conversations in the future. So thank you for what you're doing in this world, whether it be with little kids in sport and giving people opportunities, right through to some of the biggest corporates and sports teams in the world. So thank you very much for your words of wisdom today.
Thanks for all those kind words, Craig, and pleasure to be on here. Thank you.
It's time for you to join the Inspiring Great Leaders movement by visiting craigjohns.com.au. Share this podcast on LinkedIn and be sure to hashtag Inspiring Great Leaders. We would love it if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Drop us a line with your feedback and questions, and connect with us on the Craig Johns LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram pages. Be sure to check out the next Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong.